I'm going to cut this piece because I want to give what I think is a breakdown of what is occurring right now and what is taking place. And I hit Mark up this morning because I wanted to even see if Mark could join me. But I had to bounce ideas off of him just to get his own take on what was taking place. And I think our ideas were in somewhat of alignment, even though I don't know if the totality of my point of view is in Mark's. It's just what I bounced off of him. There's several things that are taking place right now. One, Russiagate. And I'll just start off Russiagate. Donald Trump, at every opportunity, is trying to bring up Russiagate. Tulsi Gabbard has released a huge amount of documentation. Tulsi Gabbard is saying she's going to release more documentation. And they have implicated Obama in the whole Russiagate thing, effectively saying, look, this was nonsense. It doesn't exist. Obama used this as a political weapon. Obama, Hillary Clinton, Brennan, etc., as a way to go after me and damage me. And to be fair, they did try to do this. Listen to what they were saying at the time when they were talking about Russiagate. They conflated a hack with hacking the election in order to get Donald Trump in office, which by definition is trying to imply that Donald Trump didn't win on his own steam. He won because the Russians pushed him over the finish line.
Russia hacking the election to elect Trump is the end of our democracy. Every votes were definitely affected. Russia hacked the election to tilt it to Mr. Trump.
The Russians definitively hacked the election.
Russia did hack the election.
No doubt. The Russians hacked the election.
Yes, Russia hacked the election.
Now, again, all of these organizations were repeating this over and over and over again. And in saying this, they're effectively saying Donald Trump was pulled over the finish line by Vladimir Putin, and that Russia instigated, intruded into American politics in order to get a president elected, which means by definition, a president is illegitimate. A country that we consider to be an enemy going all the way back to the Cold War, if not further, got a president in office against the person who was supposed to be elected, which was Hillary Clinton. And they repeated it over and over and over again. They repeated it all throughout Donald Trump's election, even trying to get him to pass sanctions against Russia, which would have, by definition, would have been Trump admitting that he didn't get elected on his own steam. Russiagate was a big deal. And I kept telling you, going back for years, Russiagate was a hoax. They didn't have this evidence that they were saying. All of this stuff was come out by Steele dossier, or for that matter, which was stovepiped into the FBI, which was a document from a political opposition figure. And then they went with the notion that Russia hacked Hillary Clinton emails. Again, when Tulsi Gabbard released the information, what you were seeing in that information was that they didn't have explicit evidence that it was true. Armitage wrote a fantastic piece on this where he went through the documentation that Tulsi Gabbard released about what the intelligence services knew, and what they knew was not much. But they used that to go after Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump comes out and tries to kill two birds with one stone, I know you guys want to talk about Epstein, but I want to talk about Russiagate. Okay, yeah, he's deflecting in this. He's trying to get rid of the Epstein thing in lieu of, hey, we should be talking about Russiagate. We should be talking about Russiagate. But it's not a coincidence that the attacks on Russiagate are coming at the exact same time that there are attacks on Zelensky. So if you're trying to come up with a deal, let's say that you want to end the war. Let's say you want to end the war. Donald Trump, two things. A, he doesn't want to look weak. And B, he doesn't want to look like he's being knuckled under for Vladimir Putin. Two objectives. In those two objectives, if you're trying to make any kind of deal, both of those issues become a problem, especially when you have this idea of Russiagate looming over your head, that you are somehow working with Putin and you're somehow a tool of Russia, a Manchurian candidate that Russia has deployed upon the United States, like Lenin was deployed by the Germans into Russia. That is a problem, especially if you, Donald Trump, you have a full-blown ego, and that is not the way you want to be characterized. It presents another problem if you're trying to negotiate, and that is hanging over your head. So Donald Trump says, I'm giving a 50-day ultimatum. Okay. But Trump knows that that ultimatum is going to be ignored by the Russians. They don't care. They are going to continue to pursue their own military objectives. Donald Trump also knows that his proxy is the one that he has some level of control over, meaning Zelensky, and for that matter, the Ukrainian government. You get first shot fired. Seymour Hersh comes out with an article that effectively is saying that the Trump administration is trying to get rid of Zelensky. Right here. First shot. Bam. You got other articles coming out at the exact same time, effectively coming out with the same thing. Zelensky is an authoritarian. Zelensky has betrayed Ukraine, etc. And initially it's like, okay, well, Hersh probably talked to somebody in the White House and they probably floated that idea. All right. Zelensky goes to solidify his power base. So Yermak reshuffles the administration. And on top of reshuffling the administration, apparently, the investigations from NABU and SAPO, offices that are effectively controlled by the United States and that are not controlled by Ukraine, start looking into Ukrainian affairs around Zelensky and the people who are circling around Zelensky. All right. When this takes place, the Rada immediately puts out a law. For one, Zelensky raided those offices. I think it was like dozens. And came up with the idea that the Russians have infiltrated NABU and SAPO, and so now we have to do something about these organizations. Okay. A law immediately comes up, and Zelensky signs that law almost immediately, taking place over the course of a few hours. Out of the blue, you also get protests that just spring up out of nowhere. Protests usually take a little bit of time to organize, but these took no time to organize. They're holding flags, they're holding signs, they're effectively trashing Yermak, they're trashing Zelensky. They're taking place all over Ukraine. Now, I would tell you, CIA, MI6, NGOs, all of these things were still in Ukraine. None of these things have never left Ukraine. And so I would wager to you that many of these people are paid very well. They're paid very well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that A, you get an attack on Russiagate by Tulsi Gabbard DNI, and B, you also get protests going after Zelensky immediately after Seymour Hersh puts out his article. On top of the protests, in a coordinated attack on Zelensky, you get articles like this. Zelensky just betrayed Ukraine's democracy and everyone fighting for it. Here's another one. We know how to stand up for our rights. Ukrainian protest law threatening anti-corruption institutions. Here's another one. Anger builds in Ukraine as Zelensky signs law targeting corruption watchdog. Here's another one. This one is from The Economist. Yes, I accept. Outrage in Ukraine as government attacks anti-corruption watchdogs. And by virtue of you having protests, you immediately get articles boosting, amplifying the protests. There might be 1,000 people out there. It doesn't matter. The fact that a protest exists is enough to get media headlines talking about the fact that there's a protest, meaning there's opposition. People are angry. People are upset. Zelensky is trying to become an authoritarian, which is a bit funny considering that the government was, for all intents and purposes, under the thumb of the United States and even its European backers in 2014 when the coup took place. Now, the other interesting part of this is obviously Zelensky is backed by MI6. Many of the Europeans want to see him stay in office. But if Donald Trump wants to try to get some kind of deal, and again, postulate two things. Trump doesn't want to look weak, and it doesn't want to seem like he's knuckling under to the Russians. Okay, you go after the Russiagate thing, A. B, you give an ultimatum, which you kick the can down the road. C, you start going after Zelensky himself if you believe that Zelensky is the impediment to getting anything done with the Russians, because you know that you have no power over the Russians. Let's go to the Russians for a moment. Vladimir Putin puts out what he wants. No expansion of NATO. The 5 regions are ours. That is off the table from here on out. No continuing to build up the military in Ukraine. He has wants. Let's assume for the moment that his wants, like every wants, and when you begin negotiations, are maximalists. Let's assume they're maximalists. Personally, I think they're reasonable. If you want a ceasefire, then the idea that you're going to continue to give them weapons is nonsense. The idea that you're going to put troops in Ukraine is nonsense. The idea that you're going to continue to give intel, etc., nonsense. All of that stuff is off the table. But let's assume for the moment that they're maximalist demands. And within the context of the core demands that Putin actually has, that he actually believes he can get accomplished, that there's leeway, there's wiggle room, whatever that wiggle room is. But you can't get anything done with somebody like Zelensky with even in the context of the wiggle room and those core demands. And let's say Trump believes that and knows that and have decided that the issue here is Zelensky. And within the context of those 50 days, something needs to take place to get him out of office or to damage him politically, where you can try to scoot him and move him out of office. And so from Trump's point of view, at 50 days, I believe there's a deal to be had with the Russians because that's what he wants, a deal, but he doesn't want to look weak in the context of that deal. And if Zelensky is screaming and crying, oh my God, the United States is capitulating, then that makes you look within the context of that deal. And you know he's not going to agree to it anyway. He could protest. And they start on an issue that is bizarre. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the context of any country that ever existed. The public has to know that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries. There was talk about paying off press gangs in order to prevent those press gangs from taking you, meaning if you pay them off, then they will leave you alone. Or if you pay them a certain amount, they will get the body of your family member. When I say this government is radically corrupt, it's radically corrupt. It was understood that Zelensky and many of the people around him were pocketing money and shoving that money off to buy houses or cars or whatever else. Are you telling me that the public didn't know that until today? I don't buy that premise. Are you telling me that the public, who is agitated and pissed off and have been fighting press gangs, was not agitated until today, where they would come out chanting, fuck Yermak? Are you telling me that all of this started only today? I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Here's another one. They're saying we're not idiots. That's pretty astonishing, right? That's pretty astonishing. Add to it this, where people are very unhappy about the press gangs. They started fighting the press gangs, and you get a situation like this. This is a guy who they're trying to throw into a van. Bam, knock him out. One punch. This is not just today. That has been taking place all throughout Ukraine. Ukrainians have been given money and resources and information to blow up those press gang centers in order to prevent the press gangs from being able to go after people in the locations. You can't tell me that the ire and anger just started today over two organizations that I'm even unclear on how much the Ukrainians even knew about. Very unclear. So, okay, we're at the last part. So, if you are Donald Trump, you want to make a deal. You want to look tough in the context of that deal. You believe there's a deal to be had. How do you get that? And would you come up with the idea of a color revolution 2.0 to get rid of the person who you think is standing in the way of the deal that you want to make? You want to look good. You want to look strong. You want to say, I'm the deal maker. I'm the guy that was able to get a deal. Zelensky right now is being forced to go back into negotiations. I believe that's going to take place Wednesday. He doesn't want to go to those negotiations, but he's forced to go to those negotiations. Why? Petros is about to fall. Russians have invaded. Ukrainians don't have the ability to push them back. And not just not have the ability to push them back, they have a severe manpower shortage that is making that much more difficult. Petros has been part of a battlefield that has been taking place for a while now, and the fact that it falls is a massive deal that is not minor. Chasiv Yar, again, it's about to fall. These are areas that have been focal points of fights that have been going on for months that Ukraine no longer has the military capability of doing anything in order to hold. To make it even worse, Patriots. How are you going to get them Patriot missile systems? Okay, well, Germany is supposedly giving them some. When is Germany going to give it? Who knows? Russia just blew up 2 Patriot batteries, meaning the entire system. Just blew up 2, just damaged 1. Russia's just hit a mercenary camp where apparently 100 mercenaries, if not more, have been either killed, wounded, or at the very least, massively damaged. Russia's been firing 500 to 700 drones every day, with moments where they would sit back and watch and say, what is the battlefield assessment of damage? When the guy that works for Trump, Kellogg, went over to Ukraine, and they said, well, Kellogg is a missile defense shield all on its own. And Kellogg visited one plant after the next, after the next. The moment that Kellogg left, Russia blew up those plants, meaning they were able to discern where Kellogg was, where those plants were, and they blew those plants up. When they're launching 500 drones a night, Kimzog missiles, what do you do for that? Let's say you had batteries. Can you really knock down 500 drones? Meaning Russia's producing so many that they're able to use that many per night. And not just in, they're using it on battlefield situations and everything else, not just in very specific targets. I'm saying that it is becoming clearer and clearer that the capability of Ukraine on the battlefield has been diminishing. And even if you give them weapons, who are going to carry those weapons? And this belief that you're going to have a drone fight as a way of dealing with your manpower shortage does not seem to be substantial. You're failing in your task. The US knows it. I would imagine on some level, Ukraine knows it. So what do? You're forced to go and negotiate. Now, Ukraine is trying to limit the level of negotiations to exchanging of people, exchanging of bodies, and maybe having a meeting with Putin. Russia does not care about those things. Well, maybe they do, but not significantly. What they care about are their core objectives that they've been talking about for the last 3 years. No NATO expansion, not getting intelligence, limitations on Ukrainian military, limitations, or at the very least, approval of having other countries come in, no military from the standpoint of Europe or NATO on Ukrainian soil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They have been open and willing to negotiate on those terms. As you get weaker on the battlefield, your resilience in saying no diminishes. If Trump wants to make a deal, this may be the way he's trying to do it. Now, I don't know if the American president can accept a deal from the Russians on the terms that the Russians are setting. I don't know. I don't know if the terms that Putin has given are maximalist, or if there's room within those that we have core objectives that we want to accomplish, and we're willing to give away certain other items in order to accomplish those core objectives. Maybe Trump and Putin have talked about what those core objectives are. Maybe Donald Trump thinks that if you can get rid of Zelensky and you have somebody more pliable, that they'll be willing to accept it. All of those things are question marks. The point that I'm making here, it is very super weird that these protests spring up in the way that they sprung up. Zelensky is Europe's guy. They don't want Zelensky to go anywhere. Trump, on the other hand, may. And considering that the US Embassy controls a lot of the stuff, is it a coincidence that Seymour Hersh comes out with his article? Is it a coincidence that all of a sudden all of these other articles come out going after Zelensky, especially considering that many of the publications, if you look at what USAID was doing in Ukraine, going all the way back to 2001, USAID was training journalists. I think 90% of the media was being supported and paid for by USAID, meaning that the media organizations were effectively underfunded by the US government. Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence? I think it is very weird. I think it's very strange. And of course, as I point out, when you ask Donald Trump anything about it, Trump would say, well, we should be talking about Russiagate. And part of the reason he wants to talk about Russiagate is put a knife in the idea that he's working with the Russians, something that you would need to do if you're trying to make a deal with those same Russians. I don't think people realize how much Russiagate poisoned the well of having any kind of deal or agreement with the Russians. One last point. Donald Trump said this, I believe this was today. Listen to what he's saying here and think of who this is targeted at as he is saying.
Spend every gave away $350 billion worth of equipment or cash. Worse than equipment, cash. So we want to find out about that someday, I guess, right? But they were supposed to buy their own equipment, but I have a feeling they didn't spend every dollar on the equipment. But they are.
He is implying that money that the United States gave to Zelensky and to the Ukrainian government was taken in part by cash and is used and funneled somewhere, meaning Donald Trump is amplifying this attack that is taking place on Zelensky right now. Because if you are Ukrainian and you know that Nabo and Sapo were investigating Zelensky and his inner circle, and Zelensky and his inner circle raids the buildings, detains, I think, 2 or 3 people associated with the organizations, and claim that they were infiltrated by the Russians, which is the reason why you were doing it. No one is going to believe that. What they're going to believe is that you raided the organizations because those organizations were investigating you, and that they were investigating you because there was something to investigate, and you raided them because you knew there was something to investigate because you were stealing money. Trump just amplified that line of attack against Zelensky and the Ukrainian government. If his objective was to keep Zelensky in office, is this really the language that you use when you are making statements like this? Is it random? Is it a coincidence? I don't think it is. I think that Scott Ritter, oddly enough, broken clock on this one is right. That they have made the choice that we can't push Putin, we can't move Putin, we want to get a deal. There is a deal to be had. We can't get the deal with Zelensky in office. We need to get rid of Zelensky. And this is Color Revolution, Maidan 2.0, with the objective of doing so. Now, I could be wrong on all of this. I could be talking squarely out of my ass. So take it into consideration. What I am trying to formulate is a model that matches real world phenomena in regards to what I think the players who are in this want and what we're seeing transpire on the ground as it propagates. Let's see how long these protests go. Let's see how long these protests last. Let's see if they intensify. Let's see if more people get involved over the course of the next several days. Let's see what Trump says and how he handles what is taking place. To be very clear, though, Zelensky is not wrong for doing this. It's not wrong. It's self-serving. Yes, it's completely self-serving. But the United States doesn't have a foreign body in the United States, short of maybe the Federal Reserve. But we don't have a foreign entity from, let's say, the Europeans or somewhere else that is looking into matters of corruption. We consider ourselves a sovereign state. And as we consider ourselves a sovereign state, any state that considers itself sovereign would bristle at the notion that a foreign entity would have some kind of clout in your political affairs. Also, it doesn't seem like they're doing that good of a job considering how radically corrupt Ukraine is as a country. So for Ukraine to say, we're taking our sovereignty and we're getting rid of this organization, or at the very least, we're subordinating this organization under my leadership, that's not insane. It is self-serving. And I don't doubt one iota that there's something that the organization could find if indeed the organization was looking for some level of corruption coming out of the Zelensky regime. It's just when you're doing this, and this is after you've taken dictatorial powers by eliminating political opposition, throwing other political opposition in jail, and on top of throwing other political opposition in jail, effectively declaring martial law and declaring yourself effectively a king who's going to stay in office for as long as there's martial law, because, hashtag reasons. The United States, when we were having our civil war under Abraham Lincoln, we had elections because you never know if the public actually wants to do something different. And it is believed that Zelensky's approval rating at this point is about, as popular as head lice, and that he would lose any election that effectively came up. So the pressure that is being applied to this government at this point, as Andre pointed out, is most likely, at the very least in its inception, external. Will there be other people who join in these protests to make it more legit? And the answer is probably yes. We'll see. Again, this is my model of events. I could be entirely and completely wrong, even though up to this point, I've been damn accurate in my reporting on these issues around the world. But we'll see. We will see. We will